Welcome everyone. In this video, we are going to see about AWS OpsWorks. So these are all the topics which we are going to see in this video. So what is AWS OpsWorks, AWS OpsWorks Services, and AWS OpsWorks Stack and components of AWS OpsWorks Stacks. Now let's see what is AWS OpsWorks. AWS OpsWorks is a configuration management service that helps you to configure and operate application in a cloud enterprise by using Puppet or Chef. So AWS OpsWorks Services. So there are three OpsWorks services provided by AWS. First one is AWS OpsWorks Puppet Enterprise, and the second one is AWS OpsWorks for Chef Automate, and the third one is AWS OpsWorks Stacks. The first one, AWS OpsWorks for Puppet Enterprise. So OpsWorks for Puppet Enterprise, it will be creating an AWS managed Puppet Master Server. A Puppet Master Server, it will manage the nodes in our infrastructure, and that will store the facts about those nodes and serves as a central repository for the Puppet models. And those models are reusable, shareable units of Puppet code that contains instruction about how the infrastructure should be configured. And also we can download the community modules from the Puppet Forge, or we can use the Puppet development kit to create our own custom modules, and then we can manage the deployment with Puppet Code Manager. The second one is AWS OpsWorks for Chef Automate. AWS OpsWorks for Chef Automate, it lets you create an AWS managed Chef servers that include Chef Automate premium features and use the Chef DK Chef tooling to manage them. And also here you can see the same kind of feature is available for this particular service as well. Here instead of Puppet, here we will be using Chef server to manage the nodes in our environment, and it also saves the information about the nodes and will act as a central repository for the Chef cookbooks. The cookbook contain the recipes that are run by the Chef infra-client agent on each node that is managed by using Chef. And also we can use the Chef tools like Knife and Test Kitchen to manage the nodes and cookbooks on a Chef server in the AWS OpsWorks for Chef Automate service. And the third one is the AWS OpsWorks Stacks. So this is a cloud-based computing, usually involves groups of AWS resources such as EC2 instances and Amazon Relational Database Service instances. For example, a web application typically requires application server, database servers, load balancers, and other resources. This group of instances is typically we'll be calling as a stacks. Now let's see in detail about AWS OpsWorks Stacks. So AWS OpsWorks Stacks is the original service, and it provides a simple and flexible way to create and manage the stacks and application. So AWS OpsWorks Stacks lets you to deploy and monitor application in our stack, and also we can create stack that helps us to manage resources in a specialized groups called layers. And also if a layer represents a set of EC2 instances that serve a particular process, such as serving application or hosting a database server. Unlike AWS OpsWorks for Chef Automate, AWS OpsWorks Stack does not require or create Chef servers. And also AWS OpsWorks Stacks monitor the instance health and also provision new instance for us. When necessary, we can also use the auto healing and auto scaling feature as well. And in the diagram, you can see a simple application server stack with the following layers like load balancer, app server, and database server. If it is going to be in AWS OpsWorks Stack, then how will it be looking like? So this is the diagram. It depicts how the AWS OpsWorks Stack consists of each and every layers for application, database, and load balancer. Here you can see three layers, one for elastic load balancing, and another layer is an application server, and another is the database hosting, that is for RDS layer. See the AWS OpsWorks Stacks components. So the first one is the stacks. So the stack is the core AWS OpsWorks stack component, and it is basically a container for AWS resources like EC2 instances and RDS database instances and so on. So that will have a common purpose and it should be logically managed together. And the stack will help you to manage those resources as a group and also define some default configuration settings. So what are those default configuration settings? Like the instance operating system and the AWS region. And also, if you want to isolate some of the stack components from direct user interaction, we can run the Slack in a VPC. And the second one is the layers. So here you define the stack constituents by adding one or more layers. So a layer represents a set of Amazon EC2 instance that serves a particular process, such as serving application or hosting a database layer. And even we can customize or extend the layer by modifying the package default configuration or adding chef recipes to perform the tasks such as installing additional packages and more. For all the stacks, AWS OpsWorks stack includes service layers, so which represents the services like RDS, Elastic Load Balancing, and even Amazon Elastic Container Service as well. So the layers will give the complete control over which packages are installed and how they need to be configured and how application need to be deployed. And the third component is the recipes and lifecycle events. So the layers will mostly depend on the chef recipes to handle the tasks such as installing packages or instances or deploying the apps, running the scripts and so on. So one of the key AWS OpsWorks stack feature is a set of lifecycle events. So there are 5 lifecycle events are there: setup, configure, deploy, undeploy, and shutdown. So these are all the set of lifecycle events which will automatically run a specified set of recipes at the appropriate time on each instance. So each layer will have a set of recipes assigned to each lifecycle event, which will handle a variety of tasks for that event and the layer. For example, an instance that belongs to a web server layer finishes booting, it will do some of the tasks. Like first thing is like it will run the setup recipe. What that specific setup recipe will perform? It will perform tasks such as installing and configuring a web server. So this task will be done by the setup recipe. And what will be happening is it will run the deploy recipe. Why the deploy recipe is running? Which will deploy a layers application from a repository to the instance, and it will perform the related tasks such as restarting the service. And the third thing what will be happening is it will run the configure recipe on every instance in the stack, so that each instance have adjust to its configuration as needed to accommodate the new instance. So in the same manner, for example, on an instance running a load balancer, right, a configure recipe could modify the load balancer configuration to include the new instance. For example, in a load balancer, we have already 2 instances and I am going to add a new instance. Then what I need to do is I need to run just a configure recipe. So that configure recipe, what it will do, it will include the new instance to the load balancer. And also, if an instance belongs to multiple layers, right, so what on that case, what will be happening is AWS OpsWorks stack run the recipe for each layer. And also, if we have implemented the recipes, right, so we can assign each recipe to the appropriate layer and event, and AWS OpsWorks stack will automatically, it will run at the appropriate time. And the next one is the instance component. An instance will represent a single computing resource such as Amazon EC2 instance. It defines the resource such as operating system and size, other configuration settings such as elastic IP addresses or Amazon EBS volumes are defined by the instance layer only. And the layers recipes will complete the configuration by performing tasks such as installing and configuring packages and deploying the apps. We can use the AWS OpsWorks stacks to create instances and add them to a layer. When you start the instance, AWS OpsWorks stack will launch an AWS Amazon EC2 instance using the configuration settings that are specified by the instance and its layer. After the EC2 instance has finished booting, right, AWS OpsWorks stack will install the agent that handles communication between the instance and the service and run the appropriate recipes in response to lifecycle events. Why? Because I have said, right, there are almost 5 lifecycle events depending upon the use case. So accordingly, those recipes will be running. And in the instance, we have there are three categories are there, right? So the first one is the 24/7 instance type. So it is not kind of instance type. This means there are three characterization how the instance need to be started or stopped. So the first one is the 24/7 instance. What this will do, we need to start manually. Okay, those instances need to be started manually, and also we need to stop it until that the instances will be running 24/7. And the second one is the time-based instance. So that are run by AWS OpsWorks Stacks on a specified daily and weekly schedule. So this scenario where it will be working is like, if you know that the predictable usage pattern, on that case we can use time-based instances, so that that will allow to automatically adjust the number of instances, and also we can stop the instance if there is no going to be a load. And the third one is the load based instance. So this particular thing is like we can automatically start and stop by AWS OpsWorks Stack based on the specified load metric. So one of the load metric we can use CPU utilization, that allow to stack to automatically adjust the number of instances to accommodate the variation in the income traffic. But the load based instances are available only for Linux based stack. If we are going to run the Windows based stack, so but this particular option will be not available. And also, as I said in the introduction of the AWS OpsWorks stack, it supports the instance auto healing. For example, if the agent stops communicating with the service, right, so AWS OpsWorks stack will automatically stop and restart the instance. And the next one is the apps. Here we will be storing the application and the repository for those kind of related files, right? So that will be, we will be keeping in a repository such as an Amazon S3 bucket, and each application will be represented by an app which specifies the application type and contains the information that is needed to deploy the application from the repository to the instance, such as we will be giving the repository URL and the related credentials also. When we are deploying an app, AWS OpsWorks Stack trigger a deploy event which will run the deploy recipe on the stack instances. So we can deploy the app like in two ways. One is automatically, and the second one is manually. So when you start the instance, AWS OpsWorks Stack will automatically run the instance deploy recipe. For example, manual option where that will be used is if you are having a new app or want to update the existing one, you can manually run the online instance deploy recipe. And the next one is the customizing your stack. So in customizing your stack, it will provide a variety of ways to customize the layers, right? So how this is going to help is like we can modify AWS OpsWorks stack by configuring the packages, by overriding some of the attributes that represent various configuration settings, or even we can override the templates that is used to create the configuration files. And the thing is like, and also we can even extend the existing layer by providing our own recipes to perform tasks such as running scripts or installing and configuring non-standard packages also. And the next one is the resource management. Here in the resource management, it will be helping us like we can incorporate like other resources like elastic IP address into our stack, and also we can use AWS OpsWorks Stack console or API to register the resources within the stack, or attach the registered resources to or detach them from the instances. And the next one is the security and permission. AWS OpsWorks Stack that is integrated with the AWS IAM to provide a robust way of controlling how users should access AWS OpsWorks Stacks. And the next one is the monitoring and logging. AWS OpsWorks Stack provides several features to help to monitor our staff and log any of the issues with our stack and any recipes. So we can provide a set of custom CloudWatch metrics for Linux stacks. And also for Windows Stack, we can monitor from the CloudWatch console itself. And also we can monitor it via CloudTrail logs, which record the API calls made by or on behalf of AWS OpsWorks Stack in our AWS account. And we can also even see the chef logs that will show the life cycle event on each instance, such as which recipes were run and which error have occurred. And the last one is the CLI SDK AWS CloudFormation template. In addition to the console, AWS OpsWorks Stacks also supports a CLI and SDKs for multiple languages that can be used to perform any operations. So thanks for watching this video.